The console wars, people's insane dedication to a particular box, which, granted, for its inception was companies doing it, trying to get people to convince them in order to buy their box with their competitors, and also back when there were differences between the boxes. But people nowadays love to say that the console wars are over. I don't understand why people keep arguing over this dumb, trivial stuff, even though the companies themselves literally started it as a marketing ploy. But I'll go more into that. I was not alive during the era of Nintendo versus Sega, so I don't have much to say about it, because all I can say is from a second-hand perspective of seeing all the advertisements of the whole entire, like Sega does with Nintendon't and stuff like that. Instead, I have more from the era of the PlayStation 2 and onward, of seeing people firsthand have these weird console war arguments over devices, even though, granted, I knew, no one who had an Xbox. In fact, despite the fact that I own an original Xbox, I didn't even know what the thing even really was. The PlayStation 3, Xbox 360 era is where I truly saw people, by people I mean children, because it's school days, of people arguing over which console was superior, or just which one people just had to have for X, Y, or Z reasons. People love to constantly remind you about the Red Ring of Death, Xbox 360 consoles literally cut themselves to death, the giant PR disaster, but me having a PlayStation 3 first, I got to experience the yellow light of death instead, which strangely feels less talked about, how it was basically the same issue, the console cooking itself to death, except the difference being that Sony didn't really care if you were affected and just let you deal with it. It was one of those things that weirdly doesn't get mentioned much, especially since yellow light death was a major issue that did get media coverage, but all anyone cares about is the Red Ring of Death, which was a problem, but at least Microsoft tried to fix the problem. Keyword being tried, they weren't perfect, but the PS3 just kind of told you to go screw yourself, and then made these slimmer models that didn't have the issue, but also removed features such as the PS2 emulator that was in the older versions. Now, I could wax poetically about the idea of, you see, people would argue Xbox 360 was better because of the robustness of Xbox Live and the Xbox Party Chat, making it a better social and multiplayer infrastructure, allowing you to even socialize greatly with friends across multiple games thanks to the Xbox Live Party Chat. And the PlayStation 3 was more for the single-player experience of the refined exclusives that started out not great, but improved over time as the console existed, creating many new IPs that are beloved. I could say all that, but when it came to reality of children arguing about consoles, it was just the most petty shit. There was no actual rhyme or reason. It was just 12 to 14-year-olds saying the other console sucked and having no actual reason for why they felt like that at all. There's no giant logic of children literally arguing over a plastic box whatsoever. They just enjoy what they enjoyed, and like everything else on the planet, wanted validation for what they have, so they try to make themselves seem superior. Because honestly, can't remember much of it really competing between Sony and Microsoft during the PS3 and Xbox 360 era. And the fact that people like the PS3 quietly won. Hello, the Nintendo Wii outsold the both of y'all. What the hell is this BS? Which is another thing. Despite the whole console war, you want to prefer which your console that you owned was superior. You also have the fact that freaking the Wii just was seen as like something you just have. Like, everyone had a Wii. It was one of those things that it was obligated to own a Wii, but it's one of those things that people strangely never thought the idea of someone who would only have a Nintendo Wii and no other system, which parallels nowadays with the Switch, where people find it weird if someone only has a Switch and no other game console. But it's one of those things where the Wii beat the both of them. You want to count sales, but no, people still count it as want to go with the power of the hardware and everything, even though the PS3's hardware is a piece of crap. But it's one of those things where it's like, weird how people judged it on that matter, talk about online, when in reality in person, it's just two kids going, you suck, your console sucked, it's lame, it's bad. Why is it bad? Because it's bad. I don't need a reason to explain it. It's horrible, bleh. I mentioned earlier that my PlayStation 3 got the yellow light of death. And once that console died, my older sister bought the family Xbox 360, so I got to try all 360 exclusives I didn't get to play. Like the fact that, I got to finally play Halo 3. I played Halo 2 back on the original Xbox. Gears of War. I heard good things about the Gears of War franchise. I remember the ads for Gears of War 3 hyping up this big experience. Cool stuff to enjoy. But in middle school, my PS3 friends thought I was some sort of traitor. Just massive traitor, because now I had Xbox 360 instead of a PlayStation 3, and they had no reason to actually dislike Xbox 360, aside from the fact that it wasn't a PS3, and that's about it. They had no actual particular reason. I even had one of my cousins call me up, literally acting as showing me a traitor from an Xbox 360. It's like, I don't know, my sister's on Xbox 360 because she wanted to play Halo and Tales of Vesperia. What do you want? What the F do you want? She bought another PS3 that's down the line, but at that time I was like, time to play 360. So I got to enjoy stuff that I normally would never use on PlayStation, like for example a party chat system. Since my friends on PS3 would either be just solely be playing Call of Duty, or we would instead just be playing the single player exclusives. On 360, I get to enjoy talking about other things. So I got to play stuff like Dead Rising 2, Case Zero, and Case West. They're also Xbox 360 exclusives. They were freaking cool to play, and I had to go around finding random lobbies when I play as Frank West and Case West, where I also ended up meeting other people. 360, I was definitely more social on the Xbox 360 compared to the PS3, because the exclusives there were built more around a multiplayer experience, so it was more the nature of the console, even with an aspect that I feel people don't really bring up, as opposed to talk about the big PlayStation exclusives, and just think of Uncharted. Yes, Uncharted had a multiplayer mode, but the main selling point of Uncharted was a single-player campaign. You had Infamous, you had Last of Us, and Last of Us did have a beloved factions mode, but the main thing people talked about was single-player campaign, which is exactly the most social of exclusives, I'm trying to say, compared to Xbox 360 that either had more co-op based games or just also had Call of Duty getting exclusive stuff a month early compared to the PS3. Now the big thing that really made heads turn when it came to PlayStation 4 and Xbox One's unveiling were Microsoft did a bad job trying to convince people with Xbox One with their initial plans for always online and stuff like that, trying to punish you for buying used games, where even my friends who were diehard Xbox fans were preferring the idea of getting a PlayStation 4. They did get an Xbox One instead once the decisions were backpedaled, but it showed how, despite people picturing console war fans as illogical people, there is sometimes when they do look at the option and go, maybe not. Meanwhile, for me at that time, I cared more about the Wii U's exclusives and stuff like that, because I just preferred exclusive Nintendo games compared to exclusives of PlayStation or Xbox, which people thought I was the weird one when they came to asking me PS4, Xbox One, and I'm like, the Wii U. And they unironically thought I was joking because they couldn't take that seriously. And they were right to take that seriously considering how the Wii U turned out. But it's one of those things where people who were die-hard for a certain platform were not considering the alternative, because it shows that they're not completely stupid, unthinking beasts. They can know when they're getting a bad deal as well. Even Sony got into the mix when they made that how to share games on PlayStation 4 video.
This is how you share your games on PS4.
Thanks.
PlayStation.
That wasn't a simple thing of, you share the game, your friend says thank you. That's the important part, to say thank you. But the timing of when they did it during E3 after a bad Xbox One presentation highlights the timing, and they were doing it to dunk on Xbox, and whether like it or not, feeding into the console wars. I taught my Xbox friends who were thinking of just going to PlayStation 4 because they didn't like the prospects of the Xbox One. I even saw streamers try to say that PlayStation fans should be an ambassador to Xbox friends to tell them not to buy an Xbox One, specifically because of the policies.
Microsoft has said that a fee would be charged for any game disc to be tied to a second Xbox Live account following its initial installation. Where'd that come from, Shade? Oh my god, are you serious? It's confirmed? Holy fuck. And it will always install the... Guys, you can't do this. You cannot support Xbox after this. That's it. I'm full-blown nuclear on this. You can't support Xbox after today. No matter how much you're dedicated to your gamer score, no matter how much this matters to you, that like you have all your friends on there, go to your friends, be an ambassador to them about not buying the Xbox.
Even big YouTubers who love Xbox and love the brand and everything were thinking of just telling people not to buy an Xbox One, or convince them to at least give PlayStation a try, and they did, and they enjoyed it, and that's great for them. Now, I know the topic is console wars, but I'm just saying, I haven't seen a DS and PSP fan have beef. I remember one games journalist who was trying to manufacture some beef and war between the 3DS and Vita, but it didn't really go anywhere at all, because a 3DS fan is a 3DS fan who loves some of the features like Street Pass, and a Vita fan is a Vita fan. And Vita fans kind of suck because they're kind of up their own ass because they own a Vita for superior over it. But they're just their own fans and everything. Like I said, I never see these fans argue because, I don't know, they're just so different ecosystem environment that live and live. Console war in the PS4 and Xbox One was only got to a bad start with the policies Microsoft wanted to have, and then made worse when they would do stuff like buying exclusivity rights to stuff like The Witcher 3, or the Tomb Raider reboot sequel entries from the second and third games, which made people feel like it was reek of being desperate. Just ignore that when PlayStation does that for Final Fantasy, people don't say it reeks of being desperate. One of the dumbest statements I ever heard that came from a streamer during this era of gaming was the claim that Sony makes studios from the ground up, while Microsoft instead just buys pieces of studios, which makes no sense when they were praising Naughty Dog, a studio that Sony bought up. That helped that there'd be more exclusives on PlayStation 4 than there was on Xbox One, not helped by Microsoft continuing to cancel projects mid-development like 5 billion Fable games. As you all know, look up a list of PS4, Xbox One exclusive titles, and these lists exclude every game that got ported to PC as well. And man, do these lists just get small when you exclude anything that also got ported to PC. But the point being that by the time Microsoft wanted to start new things, like, oh, here's Rise of Rome as a new launch title, here's Destiny 3 as a launch title that they paid for exclusivity, Halo 4 and 5 eventually, and stuff like that, PlayStation already had like Uncharted 4, Order 886, that was also a disappointment, PT that got cancelled, a new Ratchet & Clank, a whole bunch of stuff like that, Gravity Rush 2, Infamous Second Son. Even if you exclude titles that end up getting ported to PC, there's still just a bunch more stuff that people had on PlayStation, which was the big thing people used in order for the console warring. The fact that PlayStation had more games, exclusive games on it in order to justify their purchase, because it's all about validation. At the end of the day, baby, it's all about validation. All of this is about validation, whether it be the customer or the companies themselves who want to validate their purchase because they need your money. And since Microsoft already owns Windows, there was no reason not to also integrate their games to PC and add crossplay between Windows and Xbox as well, which many saw, despite it being a net benefit, many saw it as basically no reason to own the Xbox console itself. A good gesture to help bridge PC players and Xbox players together, allowing them to do party chats, play games together, and stuff like that, is seen as a bad thing by many people. That's why many don't like the fact when games get ported to PC, because they see it as less value for the console in question. Microsoft also had some big hits on their hands, like Cuphead and Ori and the Blind Forest, which what they decided to do? Port those to the platforms, because why the hell not, and get more revenue from it. But people saw it as Microsoft essentially giving the F up that their big hits were going to other platforms. Microsoft also bought up Minecraft and now own Minecraft, but still want to keep on the other platforms and added crossplay between the platforms, starting out with Nintendo, who agreed to the crossplay system, which people felt this was the true demolishing of the console warring if you have crossplay between platforms. I also remember a tweet, I hope I can find, by Phil Spencer, talking about how he was excited to play Uncharted 4, and Xbox fans were bashing him for being excited to play a game because apparently the head of Xbox is not allowed to be excited to play games. It's is only allowed to play games from his own brand, was the most small-sighted way of viewing a game developer or game company. What was Nintendo doing during its whole entire PS4 and freaking Xbox One stuff? Making a bad idea for console that had great exclusives that you didn't play, and it got ported to the Switch, made people get mad later on, but that's beside the point. It was just stupidly easy to bash Xbox during the Xbox One era. Even when they did good things, people would bash them. Like when people would be excited for Xbox reveals, assuming they would also go to the Switch later on, like Cuphead and Ori and the Blind Forest did. Meanwhile, you would have Xbox fans bashing PlayStation because of, oh, movie-like games, movie games and all that, trying to be cinematic, not play a game, big movie stuff, and just bashing the more cinematic approach to some of first-party titles and the more narrative focus on them as a big downside, which, yeah, to me, I prefer games to be more like games than trying to be like films, but it doesn't inherently mean they were bad games just because of the more narrative focus. A notion that exists to this day where people treat first-party PlayStation games, regardless of what it is, as if it's some film and not a video game, and therefore it is seen as lesser, even though that's not true, and some games have been ported to PC and everything, and people enjoy them, but it was the way Xbox fans had to insult back PlayStation. I mentioned how Microsoft bought Mojang and owned Minecraft, but they started buying up more companies as well and adding them to their Xbox studios and doing jack shit with them, like Ninja Theory. But it got to the point where people started to feel like Microsoft should buy more studios. Like, oh, they should buy Gus to get Atelier franchise exclusive. No, they should buy Sega and make Yakuza and SMT exclusive to Xbox and stuff like that. Or they should buy Square Enix. Well, despite the ridiculousness, the whole logic was essentially the idea that, oh, you should just basically starve out PlayStation third-party companies by just buying up every other big studio and stuff like that, even though Gus is not big in the slightest whatsoever. But it's one of those things where it's like, people just wanted to starve out PlayStation. And while the idea of Microsoft buying up Square Enix is laughable in the extreme, it's not as if Sony wasn't paying for exclusivity rights for stuff like, oh, Final Fantasy Remake Project, oh, Final Fantasy 16, oh, Final Fantasy Pixel Remaster, and stuff like that. Sony was far from above doing stuff like that, but people don't really bash Sony much when they do it. They get more upset at Microsoft since they were the easier ones to kick during the Xbox One era and already had a track record of doing that, buying exclusive rights for Tomb Raider. Now cut today, where more games nowadays will be multi-platform, whether it be exclusives being launched on PC as well, or Xbox titles that will also launch on PlayStation months down the road, and there's less and less exclusives out there, or more third-party games that come out on more platforms, or weird exclusions like the fact that Atelier Yumiya came out earlier this year on Xbox, but now Atelier Resident Honor, I'm not sure I said that right, didn't come out on Xbox for some reason. Or also the Greatest F got a physical edition for Xbox, but then didn't get a physical Xbox release for Tales of Xillia Remaster. In fact, they canceled that like a week before it came out for some reason. You still have weird stuff like that where Xbox is still treated like crap. But with the advent of things like crossplay between all platforms, like I said, more games coming everywhere, people wonder, why does the mentality of the console war still exist if by this point it's become more and more meaningless? And the answer? It's a beast the game industry created. Since Nintendo and Sega rivalry, they've been console warring and getting to buy their system. That's why I mentioned how about validation, and the companies validate your purchase because they want you to buy the thing. Or they try to sell you on stuff, or they feel you're superior, you're better for owning this, so you will buy their thing. Same thing with PlayStation, Xbox. I mentioned the exact timing of that PS4 ad, oh, this is how you share PS4 games, was a direct slap to Microsoft. So whether they want it to be or not, it still participates in the console war and goes, this is why you should have a PS4 and not that other console, am I right? Nintendo has just been chilling and vibing, which is why people don't really bring them up when it comes to the whole console war thing, because they're not exactly trying to start beef for anyone. They're just doing what they feel is best, which may or may not be a good idea or a bad idea. At least when people go have their usual Nintendo is evil for X or Y reasons thing, they're not saying they're throwing dirt against freaking PlayStation and Microsoft. They're just doing bad decisions on their own, baby. When Microsoft bought Activision, you know they did it because they wanted to essentially sabotage PlayStation, but the sheer power of being the only platform to have Call of Duty was so much that they had to legally put Call of Duty on other platforms because they can't just do that. You can tell that was their intent, and their intent backfired completely. Not helped by Game Pass that just neutered the Xbox sales of Call of Duty. Who could have seen that coming? A game that people buy every year, Sony selling less because you gave them a cheaper alternative? Who could have seen that one coming? PlayStation's had their own blunders, whether it be rushing out Infamous Second Light out the door, not doing much with the Order 886 despite it being, people were disappointed by the launch title, but people felt it had potential. Not doing anything with Bloodborne, like, at all, despite the huge fan demand. Constantly increasing the price of PlayStation Plus. Like, there's many things you can rag on Sony just as much for. But like I said, people constantly console war by ragging on Xbox because it's just easier to do with their blunders because it keeps happening. People want to validate their purchase of a big box, so they don't want to feel like all the bad decisions mean they wasted their money or effort or time or whatever in the big box, was why Xbox fans rather just Microsoft just spend more money to fix the problem or anything, rather than anything else. Or the fact of people, PlayStation fans, they feel like superior because, oh, bigger number, bigger sales, bigger everything, bigger exclusives and whatsoever, just ignore all the PlayStation faults, everything. They just ignore Nintendo since they're not directly trying to be in this middle of this pissing contest. The console war was a true, fully American way of trying to advertise yourself. You gotta go out there and show competitors why they suck and you're better, why your customers are validated for purchasing your box than their box, and why they are better superior. Did you think that mentality would just stop just because you want to focus more on something else? Did you think your customers will suddenly change their minds after what you drilled it to them for years? Yeah, I think the console wars nowadays are completely stupid and it's pointless to be invested in it. But at the same time, I'm also a person who keeps saying that the current consoles outside the Switch are just two of the same boxes. And some of the fact that the Switch also had its own console warring style, being the fact of portability, because Switch fans are just Vita fans, and Vita fans are up their own ass because they own a Vita. Like I said, some things just shifted. Like Switch fans do participate in the console war in a way, but just in the way of my console's portable, therefore is better than yours. Which is something PlayStation and Xbox don't have a direct comparison to, so people kind of just don't mention it or really ignore it because what can you respond to it at that point? Yeah, it's just portable. Good for you. Nothing else to say. We're also in a day and age of game industry where a company can just be one small failure away from closure. Hell, they can do great and still have their company closed. Why people pay attention to numbers more than ever, so they want to have more superiority, get more people buying the thing in order to secure its future and to get more of it as well. Imagine being someone who buys an Xbox Series X and then being told, yeah, there's the last console that Microsoft's making, goodbye. You'd be like, huh? You'd be confused. Imagine if tomorrow, right now, Nintendo just said, yeah, with Switch 2 is gonna be our last console, we're done with the game industry and everything, we're gonna go back to making Hanafuna cards exclusively and everything, we're kind of done with the video game market, okay, bye. You'd be confused. You'd be baffled. You'd be like, what did I spend all this money and effort on? I don't know, at least you had fun. I hope you had fun. You did have fun, right? You do enjoy the games you're playing. I tell people play games, have fun, right? Right? I wasn't alive at the time, so I can't imagine what it felt like to be a Sega fan who owned a Dreamcast, enjoyed a Dreamcast, and then that was the last console Sega made, and it became a third party. Nowadays, people keep trying to clap as if, yeah, Microsoft should be third party like Sega. But think of it from the Xbox fans' perspective, who spent years buying the consoles, enjoying the consoles with their friends, and hopefully they had fun with it, but just being told that, yeah, you should just not get another Xbox console in the future, and also all your IPs that you like should probably be dead in the water by this point, you know? Just want to ramble about the console wars and how It's a beast created by the game industry that feels like everyone does everything to blame the consumers, and they do have a blame in this, but let's not act as the companies didn't create it just to get more sales. Even Sonic Crossworlds had a recent commercial competing itself against Mario Kart World in the fashion of an old Sega commercial competing against Nintendo. Some people are like, huh, that's cute and funny. Other people are like, who does Sega think they are? They don't make consoles no more. Who do they think they are trying to act superior to Mario? They even do a fun tee-hee-ha-ha thing without people getting upset about it, but this is the industry I'm in. You want to be competitive, consumers are also competitive, even if the competitiveness may not fully benefit them at all, considering companies make the decisions, and they can just make bad decisions. So I gotta say, please don't seek so much validation for buying a plastic box. Please don't. Anyway, go out there, play games, whatever console you enjoy, whatever console makes you happy, and let's hope console industry improves as it keeps shutting itself. Actually, game industry as a whole does it keep shutting itself. So I gotta say, good day.